evening and welcome to Alliance on the Move. Whether you're joining us on DTV Channel 8 or any of the social media platforms, we thank you for joining us. We start this program this evening on a very sad note. This evening, we learned of the passing of Ambassador Elizabeth Harper. Permanent Secretary was the last position she held at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. To the family and friends of Ambassador Elizabeth Harper, we extend our heartfelt sympathies. Our hearts and prayers go out to you at this very difficult time. Liz Harper, as she was commonly known, was a person that can be described as someone of quiet dignity, a very professional woman who served this country with distinction. And it is a sad loss for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for her family, and for Guyana. Within the family of the Alliance for Change, we lost this week also Rennie McCalmont, a firm supporter of the Alliance for Change. Rennie has been with us for so very many years, working hard, making her contributions in her very quiet and very purposeful manner. To the family of Rennie, we send our sympathies, our prayers, our love, our hugs are with you at this very trying time. I have with me this evening the leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Nigel Hughes, and Mr. Jaipal Sharma, our in-house expert on financial matters. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on the program this evening.
Good evening,
Earlier
Bill.
today,
Oh, sorry.
Earlier today, yes, just to say that earlier today, the National Executive Committee of the Alliance for Change met, and we had a very intense, very purposeful, very frank, open discussion on the performance of the Alliance for Change at the recently concluded general and regional elections. Disappointing results, but I have, as I said, Nigel Hughes and Jaipal Sharma, and we will be discussing not only the performance of the Alliance for Change, but the elections in general. If I may start with Mr. Nigel Hughes, your opening thoughts on, just the whole election process, and then we can delve down into the performance of the Alliance for Change.
Good night, Beverly. Good night, Jaipal. Good night, viewers tonight in regions 5 and 6. Just before I respond to Beverly, I do, on a very personal note as well as me, on behalf of the Alliance for Change, want to send out my heartfelt, most profound sympathies to the family of Stacia Rennie McCalmont. I'm sure, like everybody else in regions 5 and 6, particularly region 5 in the St. John's, Bel Air, Hope Town area, I was devastated when I heard. I couldn't believe that we had lost Rennie. This is an absolutely fabulous, wonderful human being. And to her family and friends, we are offering our most profound sympathies. Beverly, you did mention your namesake, Beverly Harper, who we've lost. That is also another very, very tragic loss. I do want to offer her family, who I know personally, to Mark, her daughter, our profound sympathies. I know there's nothing that anyone can say in this moment that will truly comfort you, but this is a loss. And in my capacity as leader of the Alliance for Change, I want to salute the contributions of Beverly Harper. Sorry, yes, of Elizabeth Harper, not Beverly Harper. Sorry, Bev, forgive me. Of Elizabeth Harper to this country. She has served the country well with distinction, and she's had a long service. And to those who went to St. Rosa's, our profound sympathies. Right, the electoral process. I think perhaps apart from the disappointing results that the Alliance for Change endured, the significant aspect of this election consists primarily of the observations that have been made by the observers, particularly the European observers, about the process leading up to the election. They have said that it is, or it was unfair, that the misuse of state assets was a problem. Well, more than a problem, was a very serious problem, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this in detail as we go along. The question of absence of biometrics, also a major problem, and the fact that no campaign finance legislation, major issue, and I'm not sure that we in Guyana fully appreciate the consequences of campaign finance legislation. And so, all in all, even though the events of the day of elections, thank you very much that it went peaceful and happily, and the results, some parties have not challenged it. We have said those are the results that are announced by GCOM, and we want to move forward. There are a lot of urgent actions that have to be taken by us as a country going forward in relation to the electoral process. They also commented about GCOM and how GCOM operated. So I really would like us to start dealing with the recommendations that were made by the observers, particularly given our experience that since 2020, when they made recommendations, then GCOM failed to carry them out. We're 5 years later, and if we haven't even addressed the recommendations that were made then, I think we need, as a matter of the highest priority, to embark upon those changes, which include campaign finance legislation. Also, very, very important, the Alliance for Change wrote a letter to GCOM asking them how many of the persons on the electoral register were Commonwealth citizens. We need to know that number. How many of the persons who were registered on the list were of Venezuelan extraction, just so that our voters in regions 5 and 6 know that it's not the fact that you come from the Commonwealth that allows you to vote, is that you have to be resident in Guyana and you have to be domiciled here.
Right.
So the fact that you come on a contract to build a road for 2 years and you intend to return at the end of the 2 years would automatically disqualify you because you wouldn't be resident. You've only come here and you don't have the intention to be domiciled. You don't have the intention to live here permanently. And so there are a lot of issues. We went into an election, of course, without the census. I think we need to press as a matter of priority to have the results of the census released as early as possible, because we really need to see how many people are actually living in Guyana, how many Guyanese we have, what jobs they do, and hopefully we will get this as a matter of some urgency.
Thanks, Nigel. I would like to bring in Jai Paul into the discussion at this point. Jai Paul, I don't think many people know that you have quite a bit of experience within GCOM and the whole elections machinery, and I want us to talk a bit about that. The operations leading into ED and the operations of GCOM on ED. I know you were moving around Region 4, especially a bit on Elections Day, but if you can share some of those your observations, especially in terms of some of the shortcomings that you would have noted that affect, let us not question the results of the elections, but the whole confidence and operation of Election Day.
Okay, thank you. But first of all, let me also add my sincere condolences to the Harper family. I know Ambassador Elizabeth Harper. I was at the level of the Public Funds Committee where Ms. Harper attended to be scrutinized in relation to her performance as the officer in charge, the accounting officer. I had questioned her in detail, and on one occasion, I believe I was too hard on her, and my fellow female MPs uh, pull me back and say, no, 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 you can't do that. Very respectable woman, and they would not allow me to interrogate her. I remember that, and I only recently had interaction with her, asking her good office for cooperation when we had a senior official from the Christian community was visiting Guyana. I wanted to see the president, and Elizabeth Harper was the one that contacted, and within minutes she made the arrangements for that to happen. And so I was very thankful to her for that, her intervention. And she's indeed a very professional woman, and maybe one of the best ambassadors in this Guyana, and for the period of the PEP administration. So we're going to miss her dearly, and we hope that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would learn a lot from her and continue her good work. Yeah, so you want me to look at GCOM, being a former GCOM employee myself, and we cannot critique the activities leading up to ED without questioning the results itself. So you asked me to do something very difficult. So yes, the Guyana Elections Commission, as you know, they were ill prepared for this election. It's the first time maybe the hierarchy had the opportunity to run an election uh, of this nature. And from the onset, they made a lot of errors that we saw physically and visually at the level of nomination day, and how they treated nomination day, how they treated the AFC and the small parties. We saw going forward. Before that, even before that, we saw that the Guyana Elections Commission themselves changing the candidate form within a few days of submission of that candidacy form, knowing that political parties would start collecting name using the old form, which they would have believed would have never be changed. And because they just changed some word at the top of the form, they force the small parties to go back into various communities to get back people's signatures, and it costs a lot of delay, a lot of expense on the small parties, and as a result, a number of parties actually had intention of contesting actually said no, it's impossible, we can't do it, and they fell out or they joined the APNU, and so this was a result of unfairness again on GCOM's side, and also some level of incompetence. You're heading towards an election, you're not having your forms prepared in advance to guide the potential candidates and political parties the way forward. Then we actually enter into the election mode, and election mode starts with campaigning, and this is the elephant in the room: campaign financing. You saw the performance of the political parties, the six political parties, and the parties that have the largest votes happens to be the party that spend the most money. For example, the incumbent PPP. Um, Weeks before nomination day, the PPP had flags in every single post in Guyana. Every single pole, even the trees, was not spare of a PPP flag. And, this is because they had money. We're talking about campaigning. We're talking about massive rallies. Um, we're speaking about airtime on the national television, radio, which was not given to any of the opposition party. And rallies was being played, at least 2 to 3 times live rallies was being played on NCN. And I don't know if Guyanese are not thinking that here, if this is not unfair, if indeed the PVP paid for that ad, what is the cost they paid for the ad? So part of the election financing, there's laws in the present representation of people act to speak about election expense. Matter of fact, it's a very lengthy act in relation to the section in relation to election expense. And so we speaking in particular for campaign financing, which if GCOM had said, look, we could put election, political party could spend 1 billion or 2 billion. We're going to know how our shortfall, and we're going to know the advantage in which our opponent have. We don't know because they never declare how much they actually spend, but we could conservatively put it at maybe $2 to $3 billion the PAP spend. Then we have the win party who actually match them in their expenditure. And we could say they also spend $2 to $3 billion. But in addition to the party spending that money, those two parties, the PPP, the incumbent government, had the advantage more than any other party because they had state resources, not just television, but they had state airplanes, helicopters to the disposal. They had boats to disposal. They had the contractors who would provide transportation for them when they go into far-flung areas. They would issue contracts to communities across the country within within a month of the elections. We know that was basically vote buying. They used the data from the cash grants when they register persons and when they did the census to contact potential electors to inform them of what they could receive if they vote PPP see in the next election, and they almost call every single body in this country saying to them vote PPP, and we receive reports, and again here GCOM is at fault. We receive reports that in some community, which is predominantly PPP, that had PPP officials or supporters very close to the polling station, camping out, and sometimes in the polling place. A polling place is like a building, and in the building there's polling station. So they were in the polling place, and there was assisting persons to find the location around the polling place in the polling station, which station they go into, and they was actually telling people when you go vote PPPC, and these are things that was glaring. So then we come to the element of a person not being able to locate the polling station in a polling place, and that is because apparently GCOM didn't have the right list at the right location, or there wasn't enough staff to properly direct the potential elector to where they must go. Person actually miss the entire place. So they go to a school when this in one area when they're supposed to go to the next school. After visiting that school, which had 11 polling station in it, and after visiting 11 polling station in that school, they were told that the wrong location. Now the person already spent 2 hours going to every 11 polling station that building. I don't think that person would have gone to the now location they're pointing them into if they have to go through an X11. So the low turnout at the election is something that it was a result of the difficulties electors probably would have faced in locating the polling station. The next issue was persons that wanted to vote by proxy, and the time that was allotted to political parties to reach out to those persons that want to vote to proxies and send in that information to GCOM within the stipulated time. Again, low voter turnout was a contributing factor to that. So I would have personally witnessed contractors had this workers working on election day. Now, the election day was declared a national holiday, and I could have seen work was being conducted, construction work, people building drain, cleaning drain election day. That's a form of vote buying. We have issues of persons working in. I don't want to. Well, they can't say it, but they were working in telecommunication sector, and the telecommunication sector is a very large sector, employ a lot of people, and people was being asked to work, throughout the day, and they get double pay and things like that. So again, low turnout. So once the PPP see and the supporters were in control of workers, they ensure the workers stay away from the poll. Those workers happen to be the poor ordinary people who's actually supporter of the opposition. And so again, the low turnout at the polls. But when I visited a location in my area of responsibility, which was the Lower East Bank, I focused my attention on the PVP area. The PVP area in terms of echoes, in terms of along the corridor of the East Bank there, Providence, or Stellin area that had a lot of support for the PVP. What I observed there at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, visiting those locations was very low turnout. And that turnout, the people voting there is not supporters from the opposition. It will be most likely majority supporters of the PPP. I'm checking because when I visited the various presiding officers, and here again I must say good night to the Ghana Police Force. As I visited those various polling places and each polling station, there were a police officer stationed at every polling station. I showed them my credentials, and they were very polite in taking notes, writing it down in their book, and say, "Please go ahead, sir." And they're very polite. So we must say good night to the Ghana Police Force and to the officers that man the various polling stations, polling places, because they were very professional. Some of them even was helping out GCOM in terms of the helping out person to find where they would have voted or supposed to be voting. So they also serve in that capacity, which I don't believe was the purpose, but they would also help. So that is commendable of the Guyana Police Force for doing a good job. So what I would notice, there's a very low turnout in PPP area, Eccles Nursery School, for instance. I went there like about 1:30. After speaking to the PO, I asked her how many electors is on their list, and they would say like 260 persons. And I said, how many voted? And they told me 34. 34 persons voted in the PVP area at 1:30. Now that when I checked at the end of the exercise, I had to wait probably around 10 o'clock to look at the statement of poll. 10, 11 o'clock, I went wrong to see the statement of poll. It hadn't increased much. And that said to me that the PPP supporters did not come out in their numbers to support the PPP. It was like the PPP supporters was fed up with the PPP. And this is Guyanese supporters. Here is where now the Commonwealth citizens from Bangladesh, India, and the dual citizen in relation to Venezuelan Guyanese came in to fill that gap for the PPP. And that is why it's important that this census information that we're asking about so long, that is 2 years overdue and cost taxpayers $2 billion, is very important that we have it. This is why it's very important that uh, GCOM give all political parties information in relation to how many Commonwealth citizens and dual citizen relation to Venezuelans, Guyanese living in Guyana presently, how many they registered so far. The voted, the OLE, the official list of electors, is presently 757,690. Monday morning, GCOM is starting a continuous registration exercise where they're going to add more Commonwealth citizens to that list, more Venezuelans to that list, more Guyanese to that list, and of course, more Guyanese that will be coming 18 at the 31st of December 2025 will be added to that list. Now again,
I'm sure,
information is power.
Jaipal, I'm going to have to interrupt you a bit here. I'm also monitoring the time. I want to get back. Both of you guys made reference to campaign financing. And I want to get a bit into the discussion of the AFC's performance. And if I can turn to you, Nigel, how would you assess the impact of big spending? And it was huge spending. So
Okay,
how would
so
you assess the impact of big spending on the performance of the Alliance for Change?
okay, I wonder if I could probably start with some data that was shared. I think it was Mr. Wolford that disclosed this data. I think up to February, the president had only traveled 4 times internally. March and the subsequent months, that went up to, I don't know, 39, 41 times per month, probably up to 50 times a month. So let me give you an example. If the president flies to Aishalton to ostensibly open some project, but really it's a campaign meeting, he's using the government plane to get there. If he flies on Trans-Guyana and then gets on another plane, or he gets in a helicopter, he gets on a 4x4, he's using state resources. If you or I or any other political party or politician wants to get to Aishalton, we have to spend 84,000 return to Lethem. We then have to hire a 4x4 to get to Aishalton. So 4x4, let's say if you hire the 4x4, it costs you $50,000, $60,000. So we are already at $144,000 just to get there. We then have accommodation. And that's just for one person. The president tends to go with either ministers or political colleagues of his. So you just multiply that 144 by the number of persons that he has. So political party like the Alliance for Change has to go find 144,000 to get to Aishalton, and the president goes there either on his government plane or flies there commercial and travels to Aishalton, all of which paid for by the state. It means that every time he goes on one of those trips and campaigns, every other political party has to go into serious financial expenditure to do the same thing. And that's just by way of example. So what most countries have is they have campaign finance legislation that puts a cap on the amount of money that you can spend and also creates an obligation to disclose where that money is spent. So for example, if they say you can only spend $100 million on travel in Guyana, it means that they will mark up every time the president flies to any remote part of the country, flies to Aishalton, flies to Guns, flies to Moruca. They will mark it up. And similarly, they will mark it up for any of the other parties. And the second we go over, or the president goes over $100,000, then that's a breach. Now, the reason for that is that you want fairness. You want everybody to be able to account for the amount of money they spend, and you want more importantly to stop people who are rich or have state resources spending money to get to more people, giving them an unfair advantage. Because what that really means is that if you have enough money and you're a donor, you can literally buy the next government. You can just spend your money and buy the next government. And that is precisely why places like the United States, etc., have very detailed campaign finance legislation. So I can't say, well, Mr. Sharma comes to me and he says, I'm running for president, and he says, Nigel, give me a check, and I give him a check for 10 million US dollars. No, I have to disclose that, and that most likely will be above the official level for campaign financing. Because what this does is it means that poor people will never ever be able to run and compete because somebody is always going to outspend them. Where you have campaign finance legislation, it means all of us have to submit every cent that we spend. So if going to Supanam, we pay $2,500 going there, everybody will have to go to Supernam by speedboat. If not, if you fly to Supernam, that gets billed at its real amount. And you can't turn around and say, oh, it was a gift from a friend. It gets billed at its real amount. So if you want to give everybody a fair chance at competing politically, you have to have campaign finance legislation because otherwise it's unfair. It's like if Mr. Sharma is driving a Lamborghini and I am driving a little Toyota Vitz or something, and we're going into the same race. That is why it is so important. It's fundamental to having a fair election, and that's precisely what the observers were saying.
So let me put it to both of you guys, Nigel and Jai Paul. To what extent did the electorate pay attention, you think, to policies and the action plan, the manifesto, to the proposals by political parties in terms of how they're going to transform Guyana, how they're going to change lives of the citizens of Guyana? What attention was paid by the electorate to those programs, or do you think the electorate by and large, was just focusing on the immediate, what they can get now? I don't know who would want to jump in on
I
that.
let Jai Paul jump in first.
Sure, Jaipal.
Yeah, well, I think you are correct. That is exactly what transpired. The electorate look at the short-term gains, and they look at the spending pattern of the political party. They say if you can show the money, if you can show us that you have money to spend in this campaign, then we don't really trust you if you have the ability to fulfill whatever you're promising. So they base that on the amount of money political parties spend. So if you cannot give us something in return for a vote, if you can give us a boat, a bicycle, you can't build a house for me, you can't purchase a car for us, you can't give me a contract. It's like you have to give them something, you have to encourage them. You have to give them a taste of what you could offer them when you get into office. So they were looking forward for things like that. So basically, those with money, the political party with money, was baiting the electorate and say, vote for me, you're going to get more of this. If I could give you this when I'm not in office or in election mode, just imagine what I'm going to give you when I get office again, like a second term, or a newcomer coming in could say, if I could give you this when I don't hold no public office, just imagine what I could give you when I do hold public office. And that is the effect of spending huge sums of money and flashing it around to the electorate around the elections time. So yes, it has a psychological effect on the electorate.
Nigel, you want to make your contribution on this matter?
Sorry, remind me of the specific inquiry.
Basically, big spending.
Well, we actually saw this in a fantastic real life experience. As you know, we went down to Rupununi to Region 7 where we met our activists there. And we did 4 villages a day. We got up at 2:30 in the morning. And we don't have the resources. And literally, Beverly, the following day, the PPP, through their various agents, went into each and every village we went to and gave them either water tanks, stoves, various other gifts. And this is the day after. Now, that is not going to happen if you got campaign finance rules. Because you can't go. The other thing that we discovered is not discovered that we knew and we saw was they went into villages and started giving out contracts. And what they did is they give a contract for 1.4 million and you get an advance immediately, $800,000 payable immediately in cash. So that is clear vote buying. And this is stuff that we actually saw. This is not what we got reports we received. This is what was observed. And therefore, what would happen if you have proper campaign financing is that there would be a cap. The government can't go around spending money for 2-3 months prior to the election. They can't go out giving contracts because that gives them an unfair advantage. They can't go around. I think I saw a headline, I can't remember where it was, that in the last 2 months, the government opened about over 100 projects, I think, or buildings. All of that is clearly an attempt to influence the electorate. And all of that would be controlled by campaign finance. And I know a lot of people saying, oh, well, you're in government, you get the advantage. No, that's precisely why you don't get it. Because you cannot use the state assets. The state assets are not the private assets of a political party, and they're not the private assets of the president or anybody in the party. And so you don't get the privilege of using state assets to advance your political cause when everybody else who is competing for the same office doesn't have that advantage. And I want to give you, perhaps I think the most dangerous, I know Jai Paul mentioned it, development that happened. The telephone numbers that the government got as a result of the cash grant, they got all that information and they got all the telephone numbers of everybody who went to uplift the cash grant. And they then called all the people who went to uplift the cash grant and said, go and vote for the PPP. Now, if you took 100,000 people, if they called 100,000, and let's give them a low strike rate, 14%, that's 14,000 people that they speak to who are going to vote for the PPP as a result of them using information that they got that no other political party has, but more importantly, it's private information that they can't use. So automatically they get, if they call 100,000 and 14,000 people said, yes, okay, I'll vote for you because they promised them various things, they get 2 or 3 seats. Secondly, what they did is that when you call these numbers and if the people say, well, we're not interested in voting for you, they kind of subtly threaten them. And what they did in some polling stations is by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they check the list and they see who has voted. And they would call up the people who have not voted and say, hey, we see you have voted, especially in communities where they have their supporters.
Yeah.
Supporters are immediately going to become afraid because they feel, well, they're tracking them. They know that I haven't voted. They're calling me at 2 o'clock. They have my number from the cash grant. And they're saying, we notice you haven't voted. That is really a threat to get out there and vote. And that is why all of these matters need to be made a matter of law with very, very stiff penalties.
Thanks, Nigel. Joy Paul, the Alliance for Change has a very, very rich history, I would want to say, when it comes to elections. In 2006, when it was formed, it first election, 5 seats in the House. 2011 forced a minority government. 2015 got into government as part of a coalition. Was in government for 5 years. You were part of that government. You recently came on board with the Alliance for Change for the 2025 elections. I'm sure, like the rest of us, our supporters, you are disappointed in the results of the 2025 elections. For yourself, in terms of your engagement with the Alliance for Change, what proposals, what recommendations, how would want to see the Alliance for Change moving on from here?
Well, first of all, I would like to commend our presidential candidate, Nigel Hughes. He fought a good fight. He stayed to the end. Regardless of what he saw was coming, we had a discussion. And prior to that, before I joined 2 months ago, we had a frank discussion. And he was very open to me. And that is what drew me to him and to the AFC, because of his honesty. And we don't find that in politics and politicians. And Nigel transformed himself into a politician within that short period of time since he took the helm of leadership of the AFC, and in particular from nomination day to election day, we saw the man in action. And he was not just an ordinary politician, he was a statesman in my personal view. And so he was above what you would expect from another politician. He is what I would have liked to see there as a president or a member of the National Assembly because of his quality and his energy and his love for the people. So yes, the results came, and it's not that I am, I'm taken back, but not in a bad way, because personally, I don't believe in the results. This is what we were given. To me, we were given those numbers. To me, it's engineered, and so what we have to do going forward is, as we have to scrutinize the system at the Guyana Elections Commission. It's not internally we did anything wrong. Yes, when we went out there, people spoke about when we went out there in walkabouts in our campaign, people spoke about why we did not collate and try the best to collate with the PNC, APNU, and we had to discuss it with them, and then they understand what really transpired. But the fact is, AFC was getting battered left, right, and center. They were getting battered from the PVP and the right side, referring to them as dead meat. And you see in the election results, and people saying here, the PVP was right, they're dead meat. They were getting battered from the PNC, APNU, saying that the leadership and the AFC is greedy. And now the results come out. APNU, AFC, sorry, APNU, PNCR is saying, you see, they were demanding too much. Look the performance. And so then AFC themselves was attacked internally by the membership, and a lot of support and candidates of the AFC went to the PNCR, APNU. So in terms of attack, AFC was the target. So getting 3,600, which I believe was given to us, look, we didn't get a seat, but I believe if we deal with those unfortunate comments that was hurled against us and defend our cause and the reason why we took those actions, and also to ensure that we have a commission, a chairperson or a chairman that is professional and honorable. We have commissioners, all six commissioners. We have new commissioners. I'm speaking about a revamping of the Guyana Elections Commission. So our performance is based on what they dealt us. That is like a card game. They dealt us this hand, and we played it. If you play in trip shell, you get the bad hand, you got to play the hand. You either chuck it in or you play it. We play our hand, and this was the result. I have nothing to say. We're not sore losers. We're here to say thank you for those that supported us, and we know there are many persons supported us. We know the reason why person did not went out to vote. Uh, we are going to look at those things. Yes, there are issues internally with the AFC. I'm only 2 months old in the AFC. I can't be the one to speak on those introspection. It's only those the Congress members. But let me tell you, the AFC from day one, as you mentioned, 2005, 2006 election came in with almost 11,000 votes. In 2011, the votes was 35,333. And of course, when they joined with the APNU together, the numbers was dramatic. It increased dramatically in terms of the combined party received 207,200 votes. That is in 2015. And in the 2020 election, although we lost that election, the combined partnership of APNU, AFC also increased further to 217,922. So we had a trajectory that's showing increases when we were on our own. The AFC, when they were on their own, they had 35,333. Joining with the APNU increased the collective number and continued to increase even until 2020. What happened in 2025? What happened? a new kid come on the block and automatically receive 109,000 votes, completely wiping out the AFC, and partially the PNC, APNU. And guess who also take a bite or a chunk of bite on the PNC, APNU votes? PPP. PPP also, we could calculate it to take 2 seats from the PNC, APNU. So the I could say the ones that was hit the hardest in this 2025 election was AFC. We need to understand why that was the case. Not we did anything wrong. We did everything right. What we did wrong is that we didn't have money. And so going back into the elections and the polling stations, because of financial constraints, and this is what the people should know, that we only could afford to supply agents, polling agents, to 7% of the 2,729 polling stations. That is only 202 polling stations he had eyes at. So we cannot speak about the skullduggery, but just imagine this. With that 202 agents out there, agents came to us after election day and said to us, people was voting there with ink on the finger. The presiding officer, trained by GCOM, say, no, not ink. Apparently, the person pound the finger with the hammer and they get bloodshot. And the presiding officer said that person going to go and vote. And they voted and the vote was counted. We had case of persons going into polling station using a dead person name. Again, our agent, sole agent, objected, and that person was allowed to vote, and the vote counted. Now, replicate that. Now, people are going to believe Win had representation in terms of polling agent at each polling station. Not true. There was locked out at the first few hours in the morning until GCOM commission made representation and say allow them in. Now, you know the largest amount of voters is from 6 to about 11 o'clock. They allow in agents in around 11 o'clock or after 11 o'clock. So when, of course, they didn't have the eyes on the ground to inspect those situations. In Diamond, where I'm from, in the secondary school of Diamond, they only had one agent, and it was PPP agent. Right? So the APNU didn't put agents there, and we thought the APNU would have put agents there. We thought we would have had an eye there. So APNU didn't work with the AFC. The smaller parties the FGM and the AMP work with us, and they said, we're gonna work together. If you can't afford to put the agent there, we're gonna put the agent. But when we spoke with the APNU, they said, no, we don't want no help from you, or we don't want to help you. We're gonna do our own thing. And they also did not have agents in those locations. If you look at the statements of poll, you're going to see where agents signed those documents. And then we had GCOM themselves posting SOPs to this website that was basically a blank check, as I refer to, because the SOPs was all signed up by the presiding officer, the counting agents, and everybody. But guess what? The boxes that supposed to have the party votes in was all blank. Now, when this was brought to GCOM attention, GCOM now say, oh, it was a mistake, and they replaced that blank statement of poll with a statement of poll with numbers. But then I'm looking at statements of poll even today as I scrutinize the SOPs, and I'm saying that the polling station, they actually had polling station where nobody voted. It was 0, 0, 0, 0. So why GCOM did not say, the presiding officer did not put any numbers in that thing, because it was supposed to be 0, 0, 0. They went and find numbers and they put it in. Now, how is it this is the premier election body, say that they are the only body authorized to post SOPs, and they post in SOPs that have no numbers. Who was checking
Jaipur,
when they post those SOPs? Who was checking it?
Jaipal, I'm sure over the next couple of weeks and probably even for months we're going to be have to, looking at those SOPs, looking at those numbers, exactly what was playing out there. But I want to
I
turn
just want to
to,
add, I just want to add, there were one SOP I'm looking at. I looked at it last week and I had to look it back again today. And when I saw the SOP, this apparently the presiding officer had put in some calculation and decided the numbers in the box where the party have the numbers of vote allocated. And I said to myself, what is presiding officer doing? Like he's doing some calculation. I refer to it as trigonometry or admaths. And so that was actually what was playing out. Up to now, I can't figure out why they would be putting those little notes at the end of the numbers. Like if they're saying multiply this one by 5 and multiply this one by 0 and subtract 2 from this one. It's like a calculation I was doing on a statement of
okay.
poll, and this statement of poll is posted on GCOM website.
Thanks,
Wow,
Jaipal.
wow.
Yeah, it's those statement of poll, you really got to interrogate those properly. But Nigel, they say, heavy is hard that wears the crown, eh? As the leader of the Alliance for Change, where will you take the party from here? How do you see the Alliance for Change moving forward? And I think I must let the viewers know that the NEC meeting today give its full support to you as the leader. So,
Beverly, thank you so much for that question. One of the first things, and we started to do that today, was we started to analyze why the results, as I like how Sharma put it, that we were given were
really
given
good.
to us. I will say that the 2020 elections, the entire traditional approach was uprooted and upended by the Win Party. I don't believe any of the existing parties that competed appreciated the amount of disruption that took place, but that's another discussion. The Alliance for Change, unlike the two major old traditional parties, the PPP and the PNC, has always been the party of ideas. We don't have unions backing us where we get our traditional voter base from. We don't have a specific ethnic group backing us where we could, where we cut our votes from. It is the idea of change that the AFC has had. Now, when the AFC came into existence, there was a lot of tension between the traditional parties on the basis of race, because that's the basis upon which they got their discussion, their votes. What has happened in the last election that has been reduced in terms of priority, because the Win Party has pulled votes from all over the place. They might not have pulled enough votes from the PPP, but they certainly pulled enough votes from the People's National Congress to actually devastate them both in their traditional strongholds of Region 10 and Region 4. So the Alliance for Change, I believe, even though it may be self-serving, had the best manifesto, we call it our action plan, going forward. As a matter of fact, long before we released the action plan, a lot of the ideas that we introduced were taken and adopted by other parties. So, for example, light rail that we recommended between Diamond and Georgetown, Mahika and Georgetown. We introduced the idea of house lots for people when they turn 18. I noticed the APNU went with it, and then to a certain extent the PPP went with it. And there were a lot of other ideas that, or I should say, policies that we put forward. For the party that was the most vilified for oil and gas, one, because Mr. Trotman allegedly signed the agreement, and two, because my firm supposedly worked for Exxon, all the independent reviewers, including Mr. Ram, said that the best policy on oil and gas for Guyana came from the Alliance for Change. That is not an easy endorsement. That is an absolutely fabulous endorsement, because it said, look, for the future of oil in the country, the best plans were coming from the Alliance for Change. So we, of course, are disappointed with the results. And this was not an election in which people paid attention to policies. This was an election in which people were paying attention to the hope of getting money and reward, irrespective of how that would be funded. So people went in and said, you're going to get a contract today, you get an advance. They don't even have a date by which you have to clean the drains. And people got promised various contracts or other forms of incentives. The Alliance for Change is not a party with a lot of financial resources. And so people were distracted, I believe, with it. I'm not attempting for a second to take away from the tremendous work that Win clearly did and the results that they got. But the Alliance for Change has to continue to engage the population on what responsible fiscal action is, what a real developmental plan for the country consists of, and it doesn't consist of the government giving you a check, whether it's $100,000 or $1,000,000. The government's plan for this country has to involve real development and to move the country away from being dependent on a single project. None of the other parties spoke about medium and long term plans. What are we going to do after 5 years? What are we going to do after 10 years? What are we going to do after 15 years? And so the Alliance for Change is going to continue to engage the people that we engaged. I do want to say to the voters that in the Upper Mazaruni, particularly in an area called Philippi, which is the most populated area in the Upper Mazaruni, the Alliance for Change beat the PPP, beat WIN, and beat the PNC. Now we have to build on that, and we in Jawala we were the second most popular vote. Our prime ministerial candidate came from that region, but there was evidence that people were paying attention to policies because we didn't have any black tanks to give anybody in the Upper Mazaruni. We didn't have any tractors, any trailers. We went in there purely with our plans. And we have to continue this work of educating. We have to continue the work of going into communities. I visited some communities I had never visited before in my life. And we have to build out our party groups in that area and sell our message that I think is so beautifully articulated in our action plan.
Thank you, Nigel. As we wrap up this program, I think we have another 2 minutes or so to wrap up this program. I want to take this opportunity, Nigel, I'm sure you and Jai Paul and the rest of the management of the campaign and of the Alliance for Change would join me in saying to our supporters, our friends, those who voted for us, those who worked for us, our heartfelt appreciation. Thank you, thank you. You've stood with us, you've been there with us. To the AFC family, I know many of us still have questions, we're still hurting, still wondering. But I assure you that the AFC, as Nigel said, we will be here. We will continue. We will rise. If you want to say, like a phoenix, we're going to rise out of this. You know, I have said, viewers, I've said to Nigel, I lived through the time of Forbes Burnham when he was being criticized, and I've lived to see many of his critics turn around to laud the vision of Forbes Burnham, to understand where it is that he wanted to take this country. I'm not saying he's any angel. And I've said to Nigel, you are a man before your time. I'm not going to have to wait another decade or 2 decades to see many persons turn around and say we should have listened to Nigel News. I am that firm believer in the policy and the plans of the Alliance for Change. I know our policies are strong. We have good leaders. We have good people working for us. David Patterson, Dr. Vince Adams, Kathy, Camille out in the region, Ken down in Region 9, Allison in Region 5. And so to my AFC family, let's stay the course. Ours is a party of integrity, so let's stay the course. We have a lot to offer our country. And so, Jai Paul, Nigel, thank you for spending this time with me. And to our viewers out there, thank you. And especially to the team at DTV, thank you so much for this time.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.